I was standing at the bakery counter, picking out a simple birthday cake for my grandson, when the young woman behind the register suddenly grabbed my wrist. Her fingers were cold from the glass case, her grip surprisingly tight for someone so slight. Her eyes were wide, almost frightened, and she leaned so close I could smell the mint on her breath and feel the faint tremble in her hand. "Ma'am," she whispered, voice cracking, "you're Noah's mother, right? You need to know what your daughter-in-law and her father have been doing with the money you keep sending them." The words slammed into me so hard I almost dropped the cake box. My chest tightened like someone had wrapped a belt around my ribs and yanked. The fluorescent lights overhead felt suddenly too bright, the smell of sugar and yeast too sweet, suffocating. I paid somehow, hands shaking as I dug crumpled bills from my purse, walked out of the store in a daze, and stood on the sidewalk clutching that cheap vanilla sheet cake like it was the only real thing left in the world. The summer heat pressed against my skin, but inside I had gone ice cold. If this story shook you the way it still shakes me, please subscribe to Her Side and stay with me. There are more truths I need to share, and I don't want to walk through them alone. My name is Margaret Whitaker. I'm 71 years old, widowed 15 years now, living on Social Security and the tiny pension my late husband left me in a one-bedroom apartment above the old hardware store on Maple Street. The floors creak, the radiator clanks all winter, and every dollar is counted twice, sometimes 3 times, before I let it go. I clip coupons until my fingers ache, buy day-old bread because it's 20 cents cheaper, and still send whatever I can scrape together to my only child, Noah, whenever his wife Tessa calls crying about another emergency. I tell myself it's what mothers do. I tell myself love looks like sacrifice. Noah married Tessa 4 years ago. From the start, something felt off. She was sweet as pie in front of him, cool toward me, her smiles never quite reaching her eyes, but I swallowed it. I told myself I was being picky, that I wanted my son happy more than I wanted to be right. Tessa's father, Harlan Brooks, always greeted me with big bear hugs and sad stories about losing his job at the plant, about medical bills piling up like snowdrifts, about the house falling apart around them. His voice would crack just enough, his eyes would glisten just enough, and like a fool, I believed every word. I believed because I wanted to be the kind of mother-in-law who helps, not the kind who judges. That afternoon, I was supposed to be at their place for my grandson Caleb's 5th birthday. Noah had picked me up earlier in his sensible sedan that still smelled faintly of new car because he babies it, waited in the car while I ran in for the cake. After what the bakery girl whispered, I couldn't just climb back into that car and pretend nothing had happened. My legs carried me around the side of the building on autopilot, past the smell of warm asphalt and dumpster rot, until I was crouched behind the commercial trash bins that reeked of sugar and rotting fruit. My knees cracked like dried twigs. The metal was hot against my palms. I waited there, heart hammering so loud I was sure someone would hear. Less than 5 minutes later, Harlan strolled out carrying 2 glossy black shopping bags with gold lettering, bags from the fancy kitchen store downtown I only ever window shop, pressing my nose to the glass like a child. He popped the trunk of a silver SUV so new the temporary tags were still in the window, the paint catching the sunlight like it was wet. Not the rusty 10-year-old pickup he always claimed was on its last leg, the one he said barely made it to the pharmacy. My stomach turned so violently I had to press my hand to my mouth. He loaded the bags like they were treasure, slow and careful, then leaned against the fender talking on a phone that cost more than my monthly rent. Laughing, relaxed, the deep, easy laugh of a man without a care in the world. The man who texted Noah last week begging for $300 for Caleb's antibiotics because the insurance fell through again, was laughing like he hadn't a worry in the world. I stayed crouched there until my knees screamed and the sun burned the back of my neck, watching him drive away in that gleaming car. Dust settled where his tires had been. Only then did I force myself upright, legs numb, and walk back to Noah's car on feet that didn't feel like mine. I slid the cake onto the back seat, the box suddenly ridiculous in my lap, and somehow smiled like the world hadn't just cracked wide open. The drive to their house took 20 minutes that felt like 20 years. 20 minutes of Noah chatting about work, about some new project, his voice light and hopeful, while I stared out the window trying not to throw up. The air conditioning blew cold across my face, but did nothing for the sweat prickling under my arms. Every mile felt like betrayal. When we pulled up to the address they'd given us 2 years ago, a modest ranch in Oak Ridge, or so they'd always said, I almost laughed out loud, a sharp, bitter sound I swallowed back. The siding was freshly painted butter yellow, bright as hope. New shutters the color of fresh cream. A landscaped front yard with those little solar lights lining the walkway like runway markers. The roof I'd helped to pay to replace after a storm looked brand new, not a shingle out of place. My throat closed. Tessa met us at the door in a sundress that floated around her knees like something from a catalog, the kind of fabric that whispers when you move. Her hair was highlighted with expensive golden streaks that caught the light, nails perfect ovals of coral polish, perfume expensive and French. "Margaret, you shouldn't have brought anything," she sang, taking the cake box like it was nothing, like my trembling fingers hadn't carried it like contraband. Behind her, the house smelled of vanilla and grilled steak and money, not the beans and rice poverty menu she always described through tears on the phone. Inside, the living room had a 75-inch television mounted above a fireplace that definitely hadn't been there last Christmas when they'd claimed they couldn't afford heat. New leather sectional, soft as butter. Abstract art on the walls in colors that hurt to look at. A marble coffee table scattered with glossy home magazines I couldn't pronounce the names of. Caleb ran up hugging my legs, his little arms strong, wearing sneakers with lights that flashed $50 a pair easy. I knelt to hug him and smelled baby shampoo and something new. New clothes, new life, new lies. Harlan appeared wiping his hands on a kitchen towel the color of money, grinning wide, teeth too white. "Maggie, good to see you, darling. Hope you're hungry. We went all out for the boys' big day." All out. The words landed like a slap. Lunch was filet mignon so tender it fell apart when you looked at it, garlic mashed potatoes whipped with real cream, asparagus with hollandaise that glistened like gold. Their bakery cake sat uncut on the island, 3 tiers, fondant smooth as porcelain, twice the size of mine, because apparently my sad little sheet cake with its grocery store roses wasn't Instagram-worthy. Harlan poured Prosecco into real crystal flutes that sang when they touched. "Found it on sale," he winked, and the bubbles rose like tiny lies. Every time someone spoke, I heard the bakery girl's whisper again, felt her cold fingers on my wrist. I smiled until my face hurt while cataloging every lie in the room. The crystal catching sunlight, the leather creaking under Tessa's perfect thighs, the way Caleb's new bicycle gleamed in the hallway like an accusation. At one point, Tessa sighed dramatically, pressing a manicured hand to her chest. "We almost had to cancel the party. The hot water heater went out again. $800, can you believe it? Noah came through at the last minute like an angel." Her eyes shone with practiced tears. Noah reached over and squeezed her hand, pride glowing on his tired face. My son, my kind, exhausted son, who'd been picking up weekend shifts until his eyes were ringed purple, beamed like he was proud to save the day. I watched his fingers curl around hers and felt something inside me tear clean in two. I excused myself to the bathroom and locked the door. The mirror showed a woman I barely recognized, eyes too wide, mouth trembling, hands shaking. I opened my purse and took out the receipt the bakery girl had slipped me, along with my change. Harlan Brooks, June 14, 2024, 4:27 p.m. 20 minutes before he'd loaded those fancy bags into his new SUV. Total, $687.42. Wusthof knives, Le Creuset Dutch oven the color of fresh blood, imported olive oils, truffle salt that cost more per ounce than my heart pills. Paid in cash. I stared at the slip of paper until the numbers blurred and hot tears dripped onto the marble counter.
Then I flushed the toilet for show, washed my hands until my skin stung, and walked back out to the party with evidence burning a hole in my purse and rage burning a hole in my chest. The afternoon crawled by in bright-colored agony. Caleb opened mountains of presents, remote control cars that cost more than my first refrigerator, a tablet with a case that probably required a password just to hold it, a bicycle with training wheels that gleamed red and silver in the sunlight. Every time Tessa or Harlan thanked Noah for making the day possible, pressing kisses to his cheek like he was their personal ATM, my chest tightened another notch until I could barely breathe. By 4 o'clock the cake was cut, theirs, not mine, candles blown out, wishes made on lies. The happy birthday song rang hollow in my ears. I claimed a headache, true enough, pounding behind my eyes like a warning, and asked Noah to drive me home early. In the car, I sat silent while he worried out loud that maybe the steak had been too rich, reaching over to pat my knee like I was the fragile one. When he pulled up to my building, I touched his arm, my fingers cold against his warm skin. "Come upstairs for coffee, sweetheart. Just 5 minutes." He followed me inside, concern creasing his forehead. The moment my apartment door closed, away from their perfect lies, back in my creaking, honest little world, I took out my phone and opened the photos I'd managed to snap with trembling hands behind those stinking dumpsters. Harlan's SUV license plate shining like a taunt, the shopping bags with their golden logos, the receipt the bakery girl had slipped me after I begged her for proof, voice breaking over the phone. Then I showed him the bank alert I'd gotten 2 days ago when I transferred my own grocery money. $180 I'd saved by eating oatmeal for dinner 3 weeks straight, to Tessa's Venmo, because Caleb supposedly needed new shoes for school and they didn't know how they'd manage. Noah went white. The color drained so fast I thought he might pass out right there on my faded rug. "Mom, what is this?" I told him everything. My voice didn't shake anymore. The girl at the bakery, hiding behind the dumpsters until my knees bled through my stockings, the bags, the car, the receipt dated the same week Tessa cried on the phone that they might lose the house if the mortgage wasn't caught up. I watched my son's world collapse in real time, saw the exact second the ground disappeared beneath him. He kept shaking his head, repeating, "There has to be an explanation," like a prayer. Like if he said it enough, the universe would rewind. But when I pulled up Tessa's Instagram, private to us, public to her friends, and scrolled slowly through photos of vacations we'd never heard about, beaches in Cancun, dinners with bottles that cost more than my rent, parties with ice sculptures, designer bags dangling from her wrist like trophies, his shoulders sagged so hard I heard the air leave him. That night he went home and searched the house while Tessa was in the shower, found the second set of bank statements she'd hidden in a shoebox under winter sweaters, found the spreadsheet titled Noah Money, tracking every transfer like a business ledger, columns neat and merciless, found the plane tickets to Aruba they'd booked for next month using the emergency cash he'd sent for Harlan's fake heart tests, first class, non-refundable. He called me at 3:17 a.m. Voice hoarse, broken open. "It's worse than we thought, Mom, so much worse." The next weeks were hell. Noah moved into my spare room, the one I used for storage because I could never afford a second bedroom set. Boxes pushed aside to make space for an air mattress that sighed every time he turned over. We hired a lawyer with the little I had saved for my own funeral, money I'd hidden in a coffee can labeled Margaret's Final Expenses. Discovery turned up over $22,000 funneled to them in 4 years, plus credit cards Noah had never seen opened in his name, balances climbing like ivy. Tessa played victim at first, cried to anyone who would listen that her controlling mother-in-law had ruined her marriage, that I had always hated her, that I was jealous of her youth and beauty. When that didn't work, she turned nasty in text messages that made my blood run cold, screaming that Noah had never been man enough to provide the lifestyle she deserved anyway, that he was weak like his father. Harlan tried the repentant father routine once on my voicemail, voice thick with fake tears, offering to pay it all back whenever things stabilize, Maggie, you know how it is. I saved the message for the lawyer and never called back. The divorce was final 9 months later. Noah kept the debt they'd saddled him with, but walked away free. And something extraordinary happened in the wreckage. He started breathing again, started sleeping through the night without waking in a panic, started laughing without looking over his shoulder to see who might be keeping score. He paid off the smallest credit card, $3,000 that felt like a mountain, and framed the zero balance statement on my refrigerator like a diploma. Every morning I opened the door for milk and saw it there, proof that we were climbing out. One Sunday he took me to lunch with money he'd earned, not bled for. The restaurant had cloth napkins and a view of the river. As we ate, he reached across the table and covered my wrinkled hand with his, warm and steady. "Mom, I found something in the apartment when I was packing. Thought you should have it." He slid a small white box across the table. Inside was the vanilla sheet cake I'd bought the day everything exploded. Carefully frozen all those months ago, edges trimmed, re-iced by a baker friend with the words, "Thank you for saving me," in blue piping, slightly crooked, but perfect. I cried right there in the restaurant, mascara running into my soup, not caring who saw. The waiter pretended not to notice and refilled my water twice. 2 years later, Noah is remarried to Sarah, a quiet pediatric nurse who brings me grocery store flowers tied with twine and calls me Mom without being asked, like it's the most natural thing in the world. They bought a little fixer-upper 10 minutes from my apartment, peeling paint and all, and insisted I take the mother-in-law suite whenever I want, though I still keep my own place because a woman needs somewhere that's hers alone. Caleb spends weekends with us now, his choice, and calls me Grams instead of the stiff Margaret Tessa trained him to use, his sticky fingers leaving prints on my windows that I never wipe away. I still shop at the same bakery. The girl who started it all, her name is Kaylee, got promoted to manager. Every time I go in, she gives me a free coffee and a hug that smells like vanilla and courage. She says speaking up that day was the hardest and best thing she ever did. That sometimes the truth feels like betrayal until you realize silence is the real crime. Sometimes I stand in my tiny kitchen, slicing day-old bread, the same knife I've had for 30 years, and think about that birthday cake I carried like a shield into the lie. I think about hiding behind dumpsters with aching knees and a breaking heart, the sun baking the lies right out into the open. I think about the exact moment I decided my son was worth whatever pain the truth would bring, because love isn't just giving, it's protecting. And I know I'd do it all again. Because some betrayals aren't survived by staying quiet. They're survived by women who get tired of counting pennies while liars count blessings that were never theirs. Women who decide their children deserve better than being someone else's retirement plan. So if you're out there, right now, clutching a cake or a receipt or a phone full of proof nobody wants to see, if you're hiding behind dumpsters or in bathrooms or in your own skin, wondering whether speaking up will cost more than silence, hear me. It will cost. God, it will cost. But silence costs more. It costs everything. If my story reached into that bruised place in you, please subscribe to Her Side. And when you're ready, come tell me your story in the comments. You are not crazy. You are not alone. And sometimes the strongest thing a mother can do is refuse to let her child keep paying for someone else's fairy tale. One Venmo request, one sob story, one lie at a time. I'm Margaret Whitaker, and this is My Side.